another minute?
No.
Or we could.
Let's roll.
We have a quorum. We can get going. So, all right.
All right, we're ready whenever you are.
Thank you, Ms. Riggs. So today is 5th, 2021 at 7 p.m. And this is the regular City Commission meeting, first meeting of May. Ms. Riggs, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
I'm here.
Caught you off guard. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
I'm here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
And I'm just letting Commissioner Denise McGriff into the meeting, so give her a second to.
I'm here. I just have to switch computers. Hang on.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And then you may proceed.
And I'm here. Eating.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith. I apologize.
That's all right. Here. All right. So I'll get started by saying, first, welcome to our newest commissioner, Commissioner Adam Marl. So I know your first meeting was Monday, which was a budget committee meeting. Started you out with really interesting stuff. But tonight's your first regular city commission meeting, and I wanted to officially welcome you to our virtual dais. And we're all very happy and thrilled that you're with us.
Thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith.
All right, so I think we'll get started. We will omit the flag salute in the virtual environment, and we'll move on first to the ceremonies and proclamations. So the first proclamation we have is declaring May 16th through the 22nd of 2021 as National Public Works Week. And our Public Works department, they do a great job. They do, our city would not function without our Public Works staff. They focus on infrastructure and facilities and stuff that we probably all take for granted a lot by driving down the roads and turning on water in our faucets and flushing our toilets. But we really appreciate the work of our Public Works department, and our city would not function without you. So I urge all of our citizens and organizations to, if you're not familiar with our Public Works department, then check them out in all the areas that they contribute to our city. And with that, I, Rachel Lyle Smith, Mayor of Oregon City, do proclaim the week of May 16th through the 22nd, 2021 as National Public Works Week in Oregon City. Thank you very much, Public Works. John, I see you came off camera. Thank you, John Lewis, for leading that department. Do you want to say a few words, or just come on camera so we can all give you a clap?
No, I just want to thank you for acknowledging that and reading the proclamation. I agree. We have staff that are incredible. I feel fortunate to be in the position I'm in and working with so many great staff. So they don't obviously hear it enough. So Public Works Week is important for that, if for nothing else. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. All right. The second proclamation that we have for this evening is on the agenda, it says Preservation Month, but the proclamation is actually Historic Preservation Month of May 2021. And as a city with lots of historic treasures, we value our history and our historic treasures, and without the role of history in our lives and contributions made by individuals helping to preserve those aspects, we would miss out. And so I love that our community embraces our history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we try to make it right and we try to move forward. But let's celebrate our history with National Preservation Month as May. So therefore, I, Rachel Lyle Smith, Mayor, City of Oregon City, do proclaim May 2021 as National Preservation Month. I call upon the people of Oregon City to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating this special observance. So, another yay. All right. And with that, we will move on to citizen comment. And I believe we have two or three.
We had two register, but I do not see one of them logged in yet. So we can start with Tom Guile. I know he is on the phone. I'm going to ask him to unmute his phone by pressing *6. And he will begin by stating his first and last name for the record and city of residency, and he'll have up to 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, Tom, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Name is Tom Guile of Oregon City. So I just wanted to say greetings, Mayor and Commissioners, and welcome, Adam, and great job, Public Works. Sorry to have to approach you all so soon again, but our neighborhood is facing a potential disaster here. You're all aware of the fire disasters of 2020 and the many evacuations we faced around Oregon City. We just had the driest April on record with the potential for further dry spells coming up this summer. Here in our subdivision of Trailview, we have already had notification of a level 2 and even a level 3 just a week ago. With the recent fires down on Redland Road, there must have been a fear that the fire could quickly spread up the dry canyon. This morning, May 5th, I spoke with Brandon Paxton of Clackamas County Fire District. He indicated that it is out of their authority and jurisdiction to address the property owner in question here. He said that since it was in the city now, it is for the city to address this pending fire issue. Ever since the previous city commission approved the Park Place annexation area, the owners cut down most of the trees. They laid them down in the field for almost about 3 years, allowing them to dry out. In addition to those, there are multiple large burn piles of branches and other debris surrounding our neighborhood. A year ago, we believe it was the owner's son or son-in-law who began using chainsaws to cut down the trees to sell firewood along Holcomb. Last summer, when the fires raged out of control around Oregon City, the field behind us was full of the aforementioned downed trees and debris, but also the grass had been allowed to grow knee-high and then dry as we got late in the summer when those fires began. They say that burning embers can travel on the wind for a half a mile or so. One burning ember in the field behind us would have gone up in flames, and with it are homes that are approximately 25 feet from the field. As you're all aware, the traffic on Holcomb, Redland, and other roads were backed up for hours. It took several of our neighbors over an hour to even get out of Trailview and onto Holcomb. If the area behind us was to go up in flames, our available escape routes would already be blocked. The recent fires on Redland were started by a chainsaw and possibly other means. We have a very stressful concern that as we get late into the summer, if not sooner, our homes are all in imminent danger from the field surrounding Trailview. We're not sure who to turn to for our protection. Icon apparently owns the property. The area in question was annexed into Oregon City, so it's within city limits. The city has the jurisdiction. We do not know what the solution to our potential emergency is, but I turn to you on behalf of our neighborhood for a solution. Could Icon be convinced to cautiously remove all the burn piles? Could they refrain from using chainsaws for the foreseeable dry spills? Could they use a ride-around lawnmower with a spark arrestor to frequently keep the grass and weeds at a minimum? Whatever can be done before the situation worsens would really be appreciated. I thank you for your time and attention.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Guile. I do know that I forwarded your initial comments onto staff to see, and I don't know, Tony, if you or Mr. Ray had a chance to look into it as far as code. I mean, it sounded like to me like this was a potential. I mean, you could always submit a code enforcement to have staff look into it, but Mr. Conkle, did you have?
No, I mean, we would obviously prefer that issues come to staff so that we have the appropriate amount of time to look into them. We can reach back out to, I think you've got multiple overlapping jurisdictions here, whether it's the Oregon Department of Forestry or the Oregon State Fire Marshal. We would want to reach out with Clackamas County Fire and have those discussions as it relates to the concerns that are raised. And we can reach back out once we've had those conversations to Mr. Guile and let him know what those results are.
Okay. That sounds great. Mr. Ray, did you have anything to add? I see you came on, or you're here for backup.
Here for backup, just to let you know that we have already begun to coordinate a staff through multiple different departments to see if anyone has any jurisdiction to regulate debris piles.
Okay. Yeah, this is a hot topic, no pun intended. We're getting lots of emails about concerns about wildfire in Newell Creek Canyon. I think the wildfire season last year got everybody's attention, and we've had a very dry spring, and that's also got everybody's attention. So the city commission is definitely probably hearing about it regularly, and definitely looking into measures that we can take to try to protect our city. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith. Did Mr. Guile say that this was not under the purview of Clackamas Fire District? Did he say
Yes,
that?
I did.
Okay, well, that is,
They told me it wasn't.
okay, that is puzzling to me from the standpoint that we are now members of that fire district, and it would seem to me that anything involving that particular issue would come under their purview. And as a taxpayer, I thought that that was one of the things that they did. So I will definitely look forward to staff getting back to us on what the answer is to the question. But thank you so much, staff, for looking into this.
Yes.
The name was Brandon Paxton.
Okay.
Yes, I know Mr. Paxton. He used to be stationed at Station 15 here in the McLaughlin neighborhood at one time. He's now the PIO.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Guile. We appreciate the citizen comment. And, it's a chance for all of us to learn a little bit more about jurisdictional authority and who can help and step in. Ms. Riggs, did we ever get the other?
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
We did not get the other participant.
Okay. And they were not one of the folks, they didn't provide written public comment that you had emailed out to us, so.
Correct, they did not.
All right, so we will move on in the agenda, and that moves to, we have no presentations. We have the adoption of the agenda and a review of the consent agenda. Is there anything that anybody wants to pull off of the consent agenda?
I do not.
All right, so hearing none, we will move forward with the agenda as presented. Do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
I'd like to move that we adopt the consent agenda, and I'm particularly very happy about item 7E. So thank you, staff, for moving those forward.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Riggs?
Yes, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
and Commissioner Adam Morrow. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Adam Morrow
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith. For some reason, I want to skip you
Aye.
tonight. And I'm just noticing now that, let's see, I have a number here.
We have Mr. or Mrs. McKay.
Yeah, they are not. It's not them. Sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Just want
It
to make
should be
sure.
noted that we have our first sort of commercial business downtown that's a chain with Pizza Schmizza. So that was a little hard for the heart, but it's good. It's okay, pizza.
I assume you're bringing that up because it was on the consent agenda.
Yes, yeah.
Citizens.
I said, oh my God, it's a chain.
I was like, where's this coming from? Okay, so let's move on in the agenda. So we have two public hearings tonight. They are related. We're going to tackle each one individually and be very specific about what they're talking about. So the first one is specifically about the fee waiver associated with this particular Historic Review Board approval. And so with that, I'm going to open the public hearing for item 8A. And Ms. Richter, I believe you have a statement to make.
Sure. I have the quasi-judicial hearing procedures that the commission will use tonight. And I'm going to read them as though they're going to cover both items on the agenda, both the fee waiver and the substantive appeal evaluation, just because I think it will be more efficient. So we'll do that right now. Tonight, the City Commission will hold a public hearing, two public hearings actually, to consider 2 land use appeals in the consolidated format. Except with respect to the fee waiver request, the City Commission's role is to review the record of the proceeding before the Historic Review Board, the appeal documents, and conduct a public hearing considering solely the evidence already in the record. With respect to the fee waiver, your evaluation is what we call de novo, meaning you're looking at the matter anew and you will be able to take new evidence. So this first appeal hearing, you will take new evidence, but the second one you will not. In making both decisions, the commission must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. A staff report has been prepared for each agenda item and has been made available to the public 7 days before today. The staff reports identify the approval criteria that apply to these appeals. Staff has analyzed the criteria which were contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing steps we will follow for the fee waiver request are as follows. First, we're going to have a staff report for 5 minutes. Then appellant Edgar will be given 10 minutes to present his case for a fee waiver. Others who wish to testify on only the fee waiver question will get an opportunity to do so. Then we'll be giving the appellant a short rebuttal, 5-minute rebuttal period, and then you will close the public hearing on the fee waiver and make a decision on just the fee waiver. Then we will open the public hearing for item B and move forward with the public hearing on the substance of the appeal. Anyone wishing to speak on the fee waiver request should either email Katie Riggs in advance of this hearing or raise their hand when the mayor identifies the appropriate time for public testimony. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or emailing address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the appeal under consideration. Again, for purposes of this fee waiver request, any person may submit any written material while the public record is open. Any written material received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. They must be submitted to city staff in order to become part of the record. If the city commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any decision that you may wish to appeal any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised before the Historic Review Board, the city commission, or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The members of the City Commission evaluating these applications are to be unbiased. So I'm going to question the commissioners with respect to bias and conflict of interest for purposes of both cases, but we can go back over this again in the second go round too. But The questions that I hope you will consider and respond to are, do any of the commissioners believe that they are biased or have potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or appellants, or with regard to the property or proposal in question? Have any commissioners discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as a visit to the site in question? This question about a visit to the site is going to be important for purposes of the substantive appeal, but I'll ask the question now and we can get into it now if folks want to, or we can hold it. So those are the questions that I need the commissioners to provide some responses about.
All right, so we'll, I'll just call and go around the videos that I see. Commissioner O'Donnell?
My answer to every one of those questions is no, with the exception that in order to familiarize myself with the situation, I drove by the area and my driving by consisted of only staying in my vehicle on the roads that pass by the property. And that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Morrow?
I have been witness to conversations on the topic on Facebook, but I have not participated, Facebook community groups, but I have not participated, and it will not affect my decision-making tonight.
Okay, did you, you read the discussion post?
Right.
Can you disregard whatever information was in those discussion posts when you're making a decision this evening?
I can't even remember what was said because it was so long ago.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Richter. Commissioner Smith?
I have not had a conversation with anyone connected with this about this topic, and I have driven by the site, it also in my car.
All right, and Commissioner McGriff?
I will have to answer the questions the same as my colleague, Mr. O'Donnell. I have not, the answer is no, and I have not been by the site recently. And when I say recently, not since before the first of the year. So I've not been by recently for various and sundry reasons. I was contacted by the by Mr. Skaggs some time ago, but due to my crazy schedule, I was unable to meet with him, and I did not meet with him.
Thank you.
All right, so I will say that I have not visited the site. I did not do a drive-by. And I believe, though, we probably have all received emails from the appellant, Mr. Edgar, about this development property over the last probably year, expressing concerns about this property and what's happening and code enforcement and just a variety of displeasure with what the development and how it was going down, and asking the cities to step in. So I believe all the commissioners probably received those emails. So just for the record, as well as city staff. And so that is probably the only contact or anything that I have to do with this site.
Do you remember when the last one was that you received, roughly?
Commissioner McGriff, maybe you know?
Not off the top of my head, Ms. Richter, but I did want to declare for the record, I did not forget, but I do want to say that the only discussion I've had with regard to this has been with staff.
You. My recollection, Mayor Lyle Smith, is that it's the last one I have seen was before the first of the year, I think. And I don't believe that I think this modification was filed after the first of the year. So I think
to go back to email.
I think that I am fairly certain that any of those contacts happened before the application was filed. But I appreciate you disclosing them. And if any party has any concerns, now is the time for anybody wishing to question the commissioners about these disclosures to please do so.
Just to be clear, Ms. Richter is asking for any of the folks that have joined us on Zoom. If you have anything, you can come off of your video, or you can do that and raise your hand or come off mute to say something. Otherwise, we will move forward. Okay. I just want to make sure we're all clear and on the same page in this virtual environment. And if we were in the chambers, it would be easy. Somebody could holler out. All right, so I think we are good to move on to the staff report. Is that correct, Ms. Richter? Are you
correct? The staff report on the fee waiver question.
Yep, Ms. Turway.
Kelly Reed will be presenting the staff report on behalf of the planning department.
All right, sorry, Kelly. Kelly, Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith and commissioners. I'm Kelly Reed. I'm a planner with the Community Development Department. I'm the city's historic preservation planner. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have a couple of slides for the appeal waiver, and it won't take 10 minutes. It'll probably take me 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm going to make up for that for the second part of this agenda item, staff report. So you'll have to bear with me then. Here is, see, is everyone seeing that? Okay, great. So this is the AP 210002 and AP 210003. The appeal fee waiver is associated with AP 210002 filed by Mr. Edgar. Chapter 1750 of the municipal code gives the city commission the ability to waive the an appeal fee if they feel it is warranted for fairness to the applicant and to opposing parties. So Mr. Edgar paid the appeal fee of $250, and his submittal argues that the waiver should be granted in fairness to all previous applicants who've been in compliance with their conditions of approval. So the commission has a couple of different options. You could deny the appeal fee waiver. The second option is to approve the fee waiver. In that case, you could approve it to be partially or fully waived, and then we would refund Mr. Edgar. Staff's recommendation is to deny the appeal fee waiver, considering fairness to both appellants in this case, since we have 2 appeals and only 1 fee waiver.
Kelly, you're cutting in and out. I can only hear half of what you're saying. I don't know if it's just me, but part of what you're saying is there and the other part kind of like's not there.
Okay, I'll try to get a little closer to my speaker. So staff's recommendation is to deny the appeal fee waiver. One, because there are 2 appeals here, 2 appellants, and only 1 has requested the fee waiver, and the code requires consideration of fairness to the applicant and opposing parties. And from a technical standpoint, because Mr. Edgar has not provided a detailed explanation of why it would not be, or why it would be fair to waive the appeal fee. And I'm available for any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Reed, and thank you for moving closer. I was going to ask you to look into your audio before we started the next appeal, but that seemed to be better, moving closer. So now we have the appellant, Mr. Paul Edgar, who has 10 minutes. Ms. Riggs, before you get started, Paul, Ms. Riggs, are you going to start a timer, or would you like me to do the timer on my end? I can do either.
I will start a timer. I will ask Kelly Reed to please stop sharing your screen so that the timer can be seen. Thank you.
Perfect. All right.
So
You should be set to go. You have 10 minutes. You're muted. Can you unmute first?
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, thank you. The reason why this appeal is so important is because this is the first time that I can ever remember where we've had a development go on that had over 30 incidents that were in violation listed by Kelly and the city that were not in compliance with the conditions of approval. And it's as if we don't go out and appeal this, it's like a carte blanche approval to any developer to go ahead and just virtually do whatever they want to do without even worrying about it. Let's build it, do it, and then ask for forgiveness afterwards. And the conditions and the problems that are here in windows and siding and walls and skylights and things like this are very critical. It is what we're doing is this is putting into jeopardy the integrity of Kenema as a historic district and the integrity of the city in the fact that both you and the LUBA approved the conditions of approval, and then all of a sudden somebody decides, well, I could do what I want to do. And I think that if we allow that type of mindset, if this is not totally reversed, what we're doing is we're placing into jeopardy the city, the whole process. I just think it's extremely dangerous. And with that in mind, it was mandatory that this type of process be brought before you. And I didn't know that Mr. Staggs was going to appeal this or not. I'm not talking to him, and all I know is that this was something that was so critical that in the precedence that it's setting on all sorts of issues, that without having this appeal, we could bring total chaos to the city and to historic preservation. And it's particularly important, this is Historic Preservation Month. And now all of a sudden we're making this value judgment if historic preservation is important to the city. And I think it is. And I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Edgar. Do we have any others that wish to testify? On my sheet, we're talking about for just the fee waiver. Ms. Riggs, I don't have anybody signed up for just the fee waiver item.
yes, I did not have anyone as well signed up for the fee waiver.
But can anybody, I see Ms. Basinger has her hand up. Can anybody that commented or provided public comment for AB, can they provide testimony for AA?
Yes, anybody who wishes to testify on 8A may do so, assuming that they've let Katie know or otherwise raise their hand right now to do so.
Okay. All right. So with that, Ms. Basinger, I see you have your hand raised. You'll have 3 minutes. Can you state your name and city of residence for the record? And you're on mute. I see you're on mute. So you have to take your. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Linda Basinger, and I live in Kenema. I believe this is the first time that a request has been made for appeal from a sitting HRB member. I request that the appellant, Paul Edgar, be charged the appeal fee. There should not be any special treatment given to HRB member who was not able to vote due to his prior actions on this project. Yet he continues to hold up this project, and he wants to be relieved of any financial responsibility. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Basinger. Is there anyone else that would like to comment on the appeal fee waiver request? I see Ms. Karen Blaha, you gave a clap that's not the same as a hands up, so I just want to clarify. Okay.
Yes, I would like to clarify. I did raise my hand.
Okay.
Initially.
State your name.
Okay, so let's you.
Oh, it's Karen Blaha, and I live in Kenema.
Okay.
I in fact live right next door to the subject property. And I agree. May I go on?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And I agree with the staff recommendation that the fee waiver be denied. I don't see any reason for it. If it is applied, then it should be equally done. So I simply suggest that the staff recommendation be adopted. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blaha. Right, is there anyone else who wish to testify on the fee waiver? Right, I do not see anybody. So with that, we will move on to back to Mr. Edgar. You have a rebuttal. You have 5 minutes for a rebuttal if you would like. And you're muted.
I will pass at this, and I'll wait until the main hearing. I just think it's important that we have the city commission weigh in on something that is setting precedents, and because of that, it's critical that a process like this was brought before you, and I'm glad that I have done that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Edgar. So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. And now the commission can deliberate and make a decision on the fee waiver before we move on to the other public hearing. Do I have any discussion or deliberation by the commissioners? Or a motion if there's no discussion? Do you need more information? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'll try to help here a little bit. The reasons that the staff gave to deny the fee waiver, I thought were insufficient. There was other reasons why a fee waiver could occur. If you look at the totality of the circumstances and the reference to these documents are all tied together. I think there was reference in reasons why a fee waiver could be given included potential errors. And I don't have that verbiage in front of me, but it's in the reports, and errors or interpretations where I believe part of the reason a fee waiver could be given. And I thought that the staff report simply saying denying the fee waiver was incomplete and only naming one criteria. The other criteria were there. They were actually there in the report, but not referenced as reasons, that being errors in interpretation or application. So I could dig in and find it, but it's a little bit harder for me electronically.
Muted. I don't see any other commissioners requesting to speak. I thought the staff report the reasoning was interesting, and I'm still trying to think of a scenario in which someone could come to us, which I guess it did happen recently, where, you know, the person, there wasn't an active neighborhood association and they wanted the fee waived because if a neighborhood association had the ability to appeal for free. And so therefore I felt like in that instance, that was an example of a reason of why we would consider a fee waiver. To consider a fee waiver just because someone believes that the issue, they don't agree with the judgment or the decision by a commission, and they feel like the item has a lot of weight or gravity or is very important to them. That in itself, to me, is not enough reason in order to waive the fee. That's why we have the appeal process, and that's why we're here tonight. And I think we'll tackle the substance of the appeal in the next public hearing. So so for that reason, I personally would lean toward denying the fee waiver request. I see Commissioner McGriff, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I am thinking back to the discussion that we had when we were looking at adoption of fees. And one of my concerns was that the fees for certain types of approvals or certain types of appeals should be more reasonably priced. And I believe that staff did agree with us to a certain degree and reduce the cost of the appeal for the Historic Review Board. And that was one of my suggestions. While I don't take lightly that $250 is a paltry amount of money, it's still a lot of money. But I want us to just think back and forgive me, Adam, you weren't part of the discussion, but we did talk about this at great length because the appeal fee for the regular land use applications we thought was quite high and quite significant and could possibly preclude some types of citizen participation, depending on whether they were, a marginalized community or a POC that affects. So I just wanted to bring that back to us just because we did have quite a bit of discussion about it. And I think between Commissioner O'Donnell and myself, I think we had recommended the fee be reduced to $250. So I just wanted to add that as a point of discussion about why we made it that cost.
Is there any other discussion from the commissioners? Commissioner Smith?
So I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell that finding stuff sometimes in these documents online is extremely difficult. And so I finally found the whole sentence or two that Commissioner O'Donnell's speaking to. But so I think sometimes this takes forever to find what we need as information to just kind of make a decision through these documents just when it's online. So that took me a while. I don't feel that the applicant really explained why this was a unique circumstance in the sense that it was equitable to basically both the appellants and the applicants. So I don't think that question necessarily was answered in full. So I kind of tend to agree with the mayor on this at the moment.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the waiver.
Is there a second? The motion is to deny the appeal fee waiver request.
Okay, then I need some arguments as to why not. And then I can.
All right, so without a second, the motion fails. So Commissioner Morrow, you haven't said anything yet?
I will say that I agree with the sentiments from Commissioner Rocky Smith. I'm just left a little curious as to why this is a significant circumstance warranting this action, although I do understand that $250 is a significant sum of money. So I am interested in learning more about why this situation might warrant that action as a part of the regular process.
Well, unfortunately, the appellant did not provide explanation of why. And in fact, the fee of $250 was never even raised as a potential reason for why the appeal was being submitted. And that is, I think, one of the reasons the staff made their recommendation that they did. We've heard from the appellant tonight. The appellants had 2 opportunities to provide explanation. And so I think the commission is left to make a decision at this point. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, there's so many documents, but there's another supplementary document by planning. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in it, it's from Kelly Reed. It says in AP 21-02, the appellant Egger argued that the HRB erred, and I thought that was reason for an appeal. So I thought that was not having. I also don't feel that if one of the appellants paid the money and one didn't, that's an actionable item by either appellant. The fact that one did and one didn't does not influence my judgment one way or the other. But the citation of an error is a reason for an appeal. And that exists in this other document. This thing is burdened with documents. It's just a search to find what you're looking for.
I think I'm looking to maybe Ms. Richter or Ms. Reed, but I believe that the substance of the appeal held in the public hearing. So we will dive all into all of the details of the actual of the other piece of the appeal. This one is just trying to take care of the fee piece, and then we will move into. So I agree with you. I was like that the applicant. There's plenty of reasons there. There's lots of documents. There's lots of pictures. There's all kinds of stuff to back up the need for an appeal, and that part of the appeal will happen in the next public hearing, the next agenda item. So this one was broken apart, and we just have to analyze the fee piece by itself, and then we'll move on to that other piece.
And if I may, I think that the relevant code standard for a fee waiver is 1750-290C, and it says appeal fees may be waived wholly or in part by the city commission if the city commission finds that considering fairness to the applicant and to opposing parties, a full or partial waiver of the appeal fee is warranted. So I don't think the standard is if a party has identified errors. That is language that is in Ms. Reed's staff report, but I think it's with respect to the substance of the appeal. I think the question for the commission right now is considering fairness to the applicant and to opposing parties.
Is there a motion? Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, well, given the lack of, and using my favorite word, the lack of specificity, I am going to make a motion that we deny the fee waiver.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Riggs?
Yes, I am going to call the roll. So Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
No.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
No.
okay. Commissioner Rocky Smith,
What was the motion?
The motion was to deny the appeal fee waiver.
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so we're moving on to agenda item 8B, which is the more substantive piece of the appeal. This is for appeal AP 21-02 and 21-03. So I'm going to open the public hearing for agenda item 8B. Ms. Richter, do you have anything you want to say on this item before we move to the staff report?
Just a couple of quick things. The procedure's a little bit different. First of all, I mentioned the city commission's review of this matter is limited to the record in a couple of critical points. First, only those individuals who participated orally or in writing before the Historic Review Board may be heard. So those that may testify for this part of the proceeding have to have participated before the HRB either orally or in writing. Number two, all of the issues raised have been identified in the notice of appeal filed by Mr. Edgar and Mr. Staggs. So only those issues raised in the notice of appeal are before the commission for consideration. Other items are off the table to be raised by others or to be considered by the commission. The questions here are limited to just the issues raised in the notice of appeal. And three, the only evidence that the commission may consider is that was presented in the record before the Historic Review Board. So when a number of you testified that or disclosed that you had driven by the site, my follow-up question to you is there anything you gleaned from your site visit that was something that is not in the record? I know the record is filled with photographs of the site, so I suspect the answer to that question is no. But if there are facts that you realize that occurred to you as you drove by that are not readily apparent in the record, I would ask you to disclose them after I finish this part of the disclosures. The hearing procedure steps we will follow tonight will be as follows. We've got two appeals, but because of the overlapping nature, we're going to hear them together. So we're going to have the staff report first. I had identified 10 minutes. The appellant Edgar's testimony, he'll have 10 minutes. Then we'll hear from appellant Stagg for 10 minutes. Others who participated during the proceeding before the HRB will be given 3 minutes each. Then we will have appellant Edgar will be given 5 minutes for rebuttal, and then appellant Staggs will be given 5 minutes for rebuttal. Then we'll close the public hearing and you will proceed with deliberation. So with that, I don't have anything else to add beyond what we talked about before, other than to ask if, as a result of the site visit, any facts came up that need to be disclosed, or folks need to acknowledge that they won't allow these additional facts to be relevant to their evaluation of the case, and that they can keep their review limited to the written and video materials in the record.
All right, so I believe Commissioner Smith, I believe you said you drove by, correct? Can you answer Ms. Richter's
Yes,
question?
that's correct. And I don't believe I learned anything other than what was in the record in the photographs.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell, I believe you drove by as well.
I did, and the reports were much more detailed and I didn't learn anything additional by driving past the site. Nor did that drive-by influence any decision I'll make tonight.
Thank you.
Was that it? I can't remember. Commissioner Merle, did you drive by?
I have not.
Okay. And I remember Commissioner McGriff's response, and I have not either. So. All right. So can staff really quickly, can you confirm for me that the 6 people in addition to the appellants all participated in the proceedings and therefore they're all approved to speak tonight?
Yes, I can verify that information. I verified with the planning department, Kelly Reed and Laura Terway earlier. This is Katie Riggs.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to double check since Ms. Richter had made that very clear. I figured that was the case, but always good to double check. All right, so with that, we'll move on to the staff report. Ms. Reed. We can't hear you if you're speaking.
I'm trying to be quiet because my kids are going to sleep. But I will speak up and get closer to the computer. Thanks. So I'm not going to, let's see. Can everyone see that?
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to skip over this because Carrie Richter just went over the procedures and the limitations of the hearing. You've heard that several times already. So I'll give you a little bit of background on the project, the development, and the HRB decision that has been appealed.
Ms. Reed, I'm going to stop you. Do you have a headset or some other way to connect your audio?
Is this better?
I think it will be.
Okay.
You, if it's not, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, the subject site here is a 20,000 square foot property, a combination of 4 5,000 square foot lots of record in the Kenema National Register district. History on this project is quite long. The project began in 2016 with an initial proposal to the Historic Review Board for 7 cottage homes, so smaller scale homes on the property. That was not approved. The Historic Review Board then held another hearing on the proposal. It was reduced to 6 homes. The Historic Review Board ended up approving that proposal, but requiring that one of the homes be removed from the development. So it was reduced to 5. The Historic Review Board's proposal was then appealed to the City Commission. The City Commission upheld the Historic Review Board's decision. It was then appealed to LUBA. LUBA also upheld the city's decision, and the approval of the 5 homes was then final. The applicant then subsequently submitted applications for site plan and design review and geologic hazards review, which was also required for this project. So the approved 5 homes were submitted and approved through those 2 processes. Then building permits were issued in 2018. Construction began in 2020. Staff performed an interim inspection and found discrepancies on site between what had been constructed and what was approved back in 2017 by the HRB. That then led to this application from Mr. Staggs to the Historic Review Board to request that the board approve the project with those discrepancies or changes that had been made to the design. And now we're here because appeals were filed on that HRB decision. Just a little bit more about the development. It is a cottage housing development in the R6 zone on a 20,000 square foot site. The 5 homes average 772 square feet of floor area. They're 1.5 stories, each 20 to 25 feet in height. 8 off-street parking spaces are on site, a shared open space, and a preserved wetland area. The 2 appeals that were filed includes one, AP 2102. Mr. Edgar objects to the modifications that have been made since the previous HRB approval. Argues that there are 3 items in particular that detract from the Conemaugh National Register District. That includes retaining wall height, skylight locations, and window design and placement. The second appeal is from the applicant himself, Mr. Staggs, who argues that one of the conditions of approval of the HRB should be overturned, and that is the one that is requiring him to replace the textured fiber cement siding with wood or smooth siding. Another kind of element of Mr. Edgar's appeal is kind of about process, and so I want to address that. The HRB followed processes in Chapter 1750 when there's a decision made, an applicant can request a change to that decision or a condition of approval through a major modification, which basically means that the decision go through the same process as the original decision. So this one went through the HRB type 3 review process. The proposed changes also went to the HRB through a type 3 process, which is how our code governs that type of request. I also want to point out that type 3 decisions, as you know, involve the greatest amount of discretion and evaluation of subjective approval standards. The code that the HRB uses to make their decisions, the standards that they look at, are in Chapter 1740 of the Municipal Code. This chapter governs new construction within historic districts. I've included a couple of the standards here for you all. And I've omitted some for length. 2 are new construction shall complement any National Register historic districts. It shall be consistent with the comprehensive plan, which says we should preserve and accentuate historic resources as a part of an urban environment that is being reshaped by new development projects. And then lastly, the design guidelines that have been adopted by the Historic Review Board. And these are the design guidelines for new construction that were adopted in 2006. The guidelines have very specific elements to them, which I'll talk about when we get into the specific details, whereas the other standards are very high level in general. Last thing I'll say about the guidelines, they describe a safe harbor to allow new construction projects to be approved easily and quickly. But this language comes directly from the design guidelines. It says, yet there may be occasions when alternative designs are either desired or needed, and that the HRB evaluates the proposal based on the impact, measuring how well this fits into the intent of the guidelines, and essentially what is the end effect on the historic district. And so now I'm just going to go into greater detail about each of the 4 appeal issues that have been raised in this order. First is the retaining wall height. The house number 1 retaining wall next to it shown in this photo. The height is 5 feet. The design guideline for new construction on retaining walls calls for minimizing the height and presence of walls. The appellant, Mr. Edgar, argues that the retaining wall height was limited to 3.5 feet by the HRB back in 2017, and this wall has been built at 5 feet. Upon the review in 2021, the HRB found that the wall is more than 60 feet away from the 4th Avenue pavement, that citywide standards allow walls up to 6 feet in rear yards. And further, the Historic Review Board found that the height of the wall can be mitigated with climbing plants to cover portions of the wall. And so the board approved the wall height at 5 feet with a condition of approval for climbing plants to cover it. The reason for this change stemmed from the requirement of from the board back in 2017 to remove house number 2 from the plans. And so the first site plan there, the original site plan, shows house number 2 with 4 parking spaces in that area behind house number 1. The site plan was then modified to accommodate that requirement to remove the house number 2, was replaced with open space. And the parking was reduced because the number of houses was less, requiring less parking. Here's a closer look. House number 1, the location of the retaining wall. And then another diagram showing the difference in grading. So the grading changed. House number 2 is gone. You see the retaining wall moved a little bit closer to 4th Avenue from where it was originally planned. Moving on to appeal issue number 2, skylights. The design guideline for skylights is to install them on inconspicuous roof slopes and mount the skylight close to the roof plane. The issues raised by Mr. Edgar are that the skylights are visible from the street and they degrade the historic district, and that the HRB required back in 2017 that the skylights not be visible from the right-of-way. In 2021, the HRB findings included that the skylights that have been constructed are flat against the roof, they're rectangular, and they're on side-oriented roofs, that there's precedent in Kenema for skylights on side-oriented roofs. The skylights are inconspicuous, they don't visually jump out, and that they meet the design guideline as constructed. You can see additional skylights on house number 4 and house number 2. You can see that's set quite far back from the street. And so these skylights were all approved upon the review of HRB in March. Moving on to issue number 3, the windows. There are 3 window related issues raised by Mr. Edgar. One is that the windows don't have the appropriate shadow line and sill plate. 2, that 3 window groups on house number 1 are not compatible. That's shown in the photo below the text. And 3rd, that the side lights on houses 4 and 5 have not been accepted before. So you can see the side light. If you can see my cursor pointing at that side light next to the door. So first, window design and shadow line. The design guideline is that windows shall match the member sizing, thickness, and shadow line of painted wood windows. So I've included 2 images here. These images are all in the record. This is what HRB looked at when making their decision. The new windows with shadow lines are shown here. These are single hung, maybe double hung, but they have 2 parts, an upper sash and a lower sash that kind of provide that shadow line that is similar to a historic wood window. Now the 3rd image here shows a window on house number 1. These are the same windows that have been installed throughout the project on all 5 houses. These are casement windows, and so they don't have an upper sash and a lower sash that move, and so they're kind of flat, and they don't have the same kind of shadow line as those single hung windows. The board, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the board found that if the trim were thicker, that could provide a deeper shadow line. The painted wood window example is here. This was submitted by Mr. Edgar in the record for the HRB. This window also has kind of that upper sash and lower sash, and it has thicker trim. So the HRB added a condition of approval that the applicant change or add additional window trim to achieve 2.5 inches to 3 inches of depth from the face of the trim to the glass panes on the facades that are shown here with red lines. These are the street facing building facades where you can see the windows from the street. The current depth of the windows as they are constructed is about 1.5 inches. So this condition would require them to be 2.5 to 3 inches. Window placement design guideline is about rhythm and balance. The design guidelines specifically call out as not allowed visible side and rear walls with large blank or void areas and abstract compositions. The HRB found that the designs were balanced in this case and did not require any changes. The applicant during the HRB review submitted these images into the record showing the variation that illustrate the variation that is characteristic in Kenema with different sizes and placements of windows. And to recap, of the three window issues, the HRB findings were that because the windows don't have the historic shadow line, they should add thicker trim in order to meet the guideline, that the Kenema district includes a wide variety of window grouping patterns, and that window placement is not out of balance. Moving on to issue number 4, the siding texture. Now this is the appeal that was brought by Mr. Staggs. The Historic Review Board added a condition of approval to replace the textured siding with wood or smooth fiber cement siding. The original proposal in 2017 included wood siding that was approved by the board back then. And then Mr. Staggs installed the fiber cement siding in 2020 and requested to the board to approve it as an alternative to wood. And the argument from Mr. Staggs is that the wood texture, the wood textured fiber cement board siding is specifically designed to have the appearance of wood, and that the vernacular style in Kenema allows for design flexibility. The Historic Review Board found that the textured siding is artificial and not consistent with the historic character, that the use of this siding on 5 homes is impactful to the historic district, even though each individual home is modestly sized and set back from the street, that previous HRB decisions have allowed only smooth fiber cement, including a recent project in the McLaughlin Conservation District. These images were included in the record that the HRB reviewed, showing the difference between the smooth fiber cement, also known as a hardy board, and the cedar mill style, which has the wood texture on it. The design guideline for new construction calls for wood siding or materials which have the appearance of horizontal wood siding. These images were also included in the HRB record, comparing the textured fiber cement siding on the cottage homes to smooth fiber cement, and then again to painted wood siding. And I'll remind you, the design guideline is for siding that has the appearance of painted wood siding, horizontal wood siding. So City Commission's options tonight are first option is deciding that the HRB decision is correct in full. That would mean denying the appeals and affirming the HRB's decision. The second option is deciding that HRB's decision is correct in part. This would deny the appeals and modify the conditions of approval. This would require a continuance for us to adopt additional findings. Third option is to overturn the HRB decision. This would mean approving the appeals. This would also require a continuance to adopt final findings. Staff's recommendation is based on the written staff report and all of the HRB's original findings, is that the HRB decision is correct in full. Staff recommends to deny both appeals and affirm the Historic Review Board's March 24th decision. And this is just a reminder for the next folks who testify to keep the content to the item information in the record. And staff is, Carrie and I are ready to jump in and interrupt, and we ask for your forgiveness in advance if we need to do that. And I am available for questions.
Right. I want to clarify process real quick. I know we have to move on to the appellant presentations. Can we ask questions of, should we ask questions of Ms. Reed and Ms. Richter at this point, or hold them to deliberation? Does it matter?
For me, it does.
Either now or later.
I have a question for Ms. Richter that relates to procedure.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. McGriff.
Yes, Carrie, I'm having a little difficulty with what I think you might have said with the process. So in my mind, I've got one issue over here and one issue over here, and I'm not interested in commingling them. They're separate appeals. Are we taking them separately? Because the staff recommendations seem to be lumping them all together, and I'm not comfortable with that.
If you would prefer to proceed with a public hearing to consider them separately, I think as a practical matter, you're going to consider them separately, but because you're going to consider retaining wall height, and then you're going to consider windows, and then you're going to consider siding finishes. But I didn't think it made sense to have a staff report on one and not a staff and postpone the other. There is a single HRB decision that has been appealed here by 2 appellants, and so I thought it made sense from an efficiency standpoint to hear them together. If that is not the commission's preference, we can do it any way the commission would prefer.
Okay, well, I'm just talking about me. So I don't have any issue with the staff report being the way the staff report is. That makes perfect sense to me. But in terms of my understanding the testimony and deliberation, I would like, this is just me, the one set involving the windows and all the other stuff, that's one set of things that we're considering. And then the other thing is about the siding. That's just how I am looking at it. That's how I'm keeping things separate in my own mind. So I don't know how, if the other, maybe the other commissioners are not having the same issue, but I wanted to procedurally get that out so that I can get this straight in my head.
Would it, Commissioner McGriff, to address that, I mean, at the end of the day, you could vote on each one of the 4 issues separately if you so choose in order to differentiate between each one. Would that help get to where you need to be?
Possibly. I mean, I see for me, there's a clear delineation between the citing issue and the other issues. But if my fellow commissioners, I mean, I'm not asking anybody to agree, I'm just saying I'm trying to get it straight in my own head so that I can adjudicate this in the most expedient manner possible and considering all the factors and everything raised by staff.
So I think we could take the testimony, and then when we get to the deliberation, if it's the pleasure of the commission, we could address each item individually so that there is a separate discussion on that item, if that would help. Or if you want to bunch 3 of them together and one not, whatever combination there is, but I think there's ways to address
that. That'll help. I'm going to have to just take a lot more notes. That's okay.
Okay. Ms. Richter, the question I have is kind of a legal question, so I'm going to ask it now. There is a question that's coming up, and it's mentioning it's about an issue of precedence. And I heard Ms. Reed say it, and I've heard others say it, of either other houses in Kenema or decisions that in the past that have set a precedent. Can you provide us some guidance on the issue of precedence and how that bears into our decision making or not?
So from a purely legal matter, there is no precedence established between land use decisions throughout the city. So the commission is not bound to follow precedence in the same way that a court is. Okay. That said, there may be some policy reason to be sort of mindful of uniform application of regulations unless facts dictate doing something differently.
Okay, that's helpful. It was helpful for me, hopefully for others too, because it came up a couple of times in there. So, all right.
Mayor Lyle Smith, I did not have any problem with that particular statement by staff. I fully understand exactly what they were referring to, and there's not an issue in my mind.
Okay, great. So I think we will move on to, we have 10-minute presentations by both of the appellants. The first one is going to be Mr. Edgar. And again, Mr. Edgar, you have 10 minutes. We're sticking to the items for this particular appeal. And I think you still probably need to state your name and city for the record, but you're ready to start.
Thank you, Mayor, Madam Mayor and City Commission. First of all, I'm Paul Edgar. I live in Kenema, and I'm a longtime resident and really care about the historic preservation. But because of the precedence of being set, the importance of what the City Commission did in affirming and approved this cottage home development project with specific conditions of approval. And that to me is like a contract. And so what we have is we went, it was approved by the HRB and approved by the City Commission and LUBA. But the problem is that the developer decided not to comply with the historic board approval of what you, the City Commission, affirmed, and when it was appealed to you over with over 30 incidents where they went whatever way they wanted. Whatever one would like to call this, errors in judgment or just going rogue or accepting, they know best and could interpret or adjust the contract with the city and do what they want to do. I've never seen anything like this before. It was like the cottage home developer had perceived that they were given carte blanche to virtually interpret how they cited cottages from what was approved when the building permits were issued. This resulted in cutting away a bank and lowering the height of the cottage home number 1 and building a wall behind it that exceeds 3.5 feet of requirement of the retaining walls. If they had gone before the city planning or building officials and asked for a change order that required HRB approval, it would be different. But the developer chooses to not apparently care and just went ahead and did what they wanted to do. They poured the concrete as if they know best. Anyone else, all previous contractors and builders have had to comply with our codes and our building guidelines. But this cottage home developer chose to not comply with our code and conditions of approval that the city commission had affirmed on an appeal. This act is precedent setting, and it's allowing it is the precedent that degrades the value of what everyone else has had to comply with for over the years. The wall of concrete slabs and steel has been shifting, and it was being pushed back and being wedged in hope that the movement can be controlled. But odds are it will continue to move to where it can never be faced up to make it acceptable to where this structure can be hidden or buried. Over time, this design is very problematic and thus will expose the detracting elements that should not have ever happened or ever been approved in a National Register historic district. Back in August 2020, I had filed a code enforcement complaint, and this is process, and on what was visible. And at that time, we showed the windows and the designs and what was there. It's interesting to me that code enforcement complaint was just shoved into the circular file, and now it becomes a factor so many months later. Errors in judgment is what happened. I sent these pictures in and no one seemed to care. Kelly can bring up, if Kelly can bring up the compatible or comparable historic windows in that one picture that you had on the different windows. The one in the far right of those windows is actually a window on my house, on an 1880 house, a vernacular house, and that is an original vernacular historic window. So when you compare that window, and this is what we're comparing to when we start talking about windows. So in the permit that he got, it was in the conditions of approval, it was said that the wood, they had to have wood windows. Now, he did not ask for approval to get some other type of windows or change to anything. And so this is like going off and say, okay, you have a contract, conditions of approval, but I don't care what those conditions of approval are. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I don't even have to ask the HRB. So these windows themselves are windows that you couldn't take that window and put it on my house. And so that wood window that you saw, and you compare that, that means that window is not compatible and detracting from this historic district. So that's the important thing. The LUBA also made our building guidelines not as discretionary, I believe, as what Kelly said, because there are some of these things which come back in and say, okay, skylights is an example. In the conditions of approval, it said that skylights shall not be visible. Now, he goes ahead and builds skylights, puts them up there, and everyone can see that the skylights are all visible. So what is there about that? I don't know, but it's all I can turn around and tell you. You have conditions of approval, and the contractor decides he doesn't have to comply with that. And once he's caught, then he comes back in and says, oh, can I get these approved after the fact? And if we allow that type of activity to go on, everything that happens in this city is going to be put into jeopardy. I believe that the retaining walls, the windows, the siding, all of these things are, the siding said in the conditions of approval that it had to be wood. And if you wanted to choose something else, you had to come back to the city and ask for approval. Now, what did the builder do? He says, I don't care about what the conditions of approval are, what the contract is. I'm going to go ahead. And then he put on the siding that he wanted to put on without any approval. It says, now I've got it on. Can you approve it? And if we allow this type of thinking to go on, this is the precedence that is being challenged against us. It's against the city. It's what any contractor, anyone, what we're doing is we're saying we will allow anybody to go out and do what they want to do, whether it's approved or not. And then they can come in and say, oh, I've got it done. I would like to have a waiver on it. Anyway, I think that all of the windows need to be changed out that are visible from the road. They all should be in compliance with the standards that we have, which have sill plates, have shadow lines, and if we don't do that, we lose the integrity. And I continue to fight for the integrity of a National Register Historic District, and particularly in National Historic Preservation Month. This is probably more important than ever. And what we're doing, this is, if we allow some of this to happen, God bless us. I just, and the whole idea, let's maybe give up on having Kenema as a National Register District in the first place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Edgar. At this point, we will move on to our other appellant, excuse me. This is Mr. Staggs. Mr. Staggs, you will have 10 minutes. Where'd you go? I lost him. Did he turn his video off? Did we lose him, Ms. Riggs?
I am looking for him. He was there just a minute ago, and I'm looking to see. Oh,
Maybe,
yep, we lost him. He's coming back in. Hold on,
I was
just a
gonna say
second.
he might have hit a button and accidentally.
Yes.
I was like, he was just there. Mr. Staggs, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You're free to turn on your video if you'd like. Ms. Riggs has a 10-minute time clock on the screen. Can you introduce yourself and your city of residence, and then you can get started.
Yeah, my name is Christopher Staggs, and I live in Oregon City. I'd like to focus on the primary points, on 4 primary points, and I'm going to appeal to the facts and request the City Commission remove condition of approval number 7 and allow the existing siding to remain on the homes. The first thing I'd like to discuss is the guideline, that the guidelines for new construction are silent on whether siding should be textured or smooth. The element guidelines for new construction in Oregon City on page 60 clearly articulate a principle, a design, and things that are not allowed. The principle specifically says compatible with historic siding and enclosure materials in size, profile, orientation, texture, and color. The design specifically says wood siding or materials which have the appearance of horizontal wood siding is an allowable design, which Kelly Reed mentioned earlier and explained and elaborated on that. there are going to be a lot of things that I'm going to just refer to the record and refer to the staff that I've already explained in detail rather than me repeating it again. But the first fact that I want to articulate is that the guidelines are not specific relating to the siding. They're silent on whether siding should be smooth or textured. And just to reiterate, the guidelines say wood siding or materials which have the appearance of horizontal wood siding is an allowable design. The second thing I'd like to talk about is appearance and aesthetics. The siding as currently built on the homes, which is textured fiber cement board, frankly looks better than smooth, and in our opinion is more in keeping with the Kenema character of a rich variety of textures, and is aesthetically more pleasing and has the appearance of wood siding. Actually, smooth siding was not historic and has a more modern look and feel. Back in the day, people did not sand the wood smooth when they cut the wood. They didn't sand it smooth. They just painted the home and embraced the texture of the wood. The textured siding simply looks better than smooth, featureless siding, and I would argue is in harmony with the historic neighborhood character and complies with the city guidelines. Finally, when you walk by the homes from the street, it is very, very difficult to discern any difference between smooth and textured siding. And if I could ask just Miss Riggs to show from the record page 77. So this was shown by Kelly Reed earlier. The photograph on the upper right is house number 2, taken approximately 40 to 50 feet away. The photograph on the upper left is a detail of one of the windows and the siding on one of the houses, and they're all the same. And it shows the fiber cement siding close up, which is the Hardy Plank Select Cedar Mill, which is the material sample in the lower left. And you can see from all of the images there, if you compare Hardy Plank Smooth and Hardy Plank Select Cedar Mill, which is the material that's made to look like wood, it's very difficult to discern the difference between those materials. And it's far more difficult when you're actually out in the real world, in the real life, walking down the street, looking at the siding. Additionally, there are many homes throughout Kenema that have a variety of different materials. The house right next door to us, which is one of the most historic homes in Kenema, has 3 or 4 different types of siding: smooth, textured, board and batten. And Kenema is really about that variety of texture. So from an appearance and aesthetics perspective, we believe that we're complying with the historic guidelines, and we believe that the textured wood siding, even though it's fiber cement board, has the appearance of wood siding, which is exactly what the historic guidelines call for. Additionally, the design, if you look in the design guidelines for vernacular, and I'm not gonna show this page, Katie. If you look at in the design guidelines, there's a section called design composition for the vernacular style. And in the very first sentence for the vernacular style, which is the style we're designing and building in, it says that it lacks a rigid system of exterior detailing that makes it a clearly definable architectural style. It allows design flexibility and is inherently varied. So these are the design guidelines for the vernacular style in Oregon City. And it says that it allows design flexibility and is inherently varied. So we believe that the small difference between textured and smooth certainly falls within that inherently varied world of materiality and materials that can be on a home in a historic district. The third point is that if we were compelled to replace all of the siding in all of the homes, that this would serve no public good. Replacing the siding would serve no public good and have significant negative environmental impact, contrary to the city's environmental stewardship goals and objectives. The environmental impact will be significant, increasing the carbon footprint and energy use of the project. We'd be placing over 8,000 square feet of siding in the local landfill, doubling the deliveries and vehicle carbon emissions associated with construction, and significantly increasing the cost of the homes at a time when Oregon and our city has a housing crisis worse than any time in history. And this is not my personal opinion. This is directly from the state and state statistics. We are currently in our worst housing crisis and shortage of housing in the state in the entire history of the state. So we believe that removing all the siding at this point, especially considering that textured versus smooth is the question, that this served no public good. The fourth point is we believe we were following the guidelines, the historic guidelines. Unlike the way the other appellant has, I believe, misrepresented our intentions, is we never were maliciously trying to go outside of the guidelines or outside of our conditions of approval. We believe that we were following the guidelines. And I think the example I gave earlier shows that. We sincerely believe we were following the guidelines when we used fiber cement board in lieu of actual wood. Our original application said we were going to put wood siding on the houses. That was all we said. We said wood siding. When we looked at the guidelines, we said, okay, wood siding or the appearance of wood siding is an acceptable material. And we really believe that we were within those guidelines. I also want to emphasize that fiber cement board is safer and longer lasting than actual wood. We believe the fiberboard was an improvement and followed the specific element guidelines for new construction in a historic district. I appeal to the City Commission that our as-built siding is compliant with the city code and guidelines. It is in character and is more aesthetically pleasing. Left as is will have far less environmental impact and is the most reasonable and grounded business and economic decision. And left on the homes is the most balanced and logical resolution and the solution which is best for the greater good of what we are trying to achieve here in Oregon City. I respectfully request that the City Commission remove condition of approval number 7 of the HRB notice of decision.
All right, thank you, Mr. Staggs. All right. So we have, looking at the time, and we probably do need to take a break here in a minute. We have 6 people who have signed up for public testimony on this.
We've had a few more, additions since I gave that to you. So we have a total
and a few more additions.
Yeah.
So they will be at least 3 minutes apiece. You can probably figure that's at least 30 or 40 minutes, right? If we have, say, 10 people at 3 minutes apiece. So why don't, I'm thinking we should probably, I'm looking to the pleasure of the commission. Do you want to take a 5 or 10 minute break now, or do it after we've heard public testimony? If there's no opinions, we will continue moving forward.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I'd rather hear the testimony and then take a break.
Okay.
I agree.
That sounds good. I will say, given the time and the hour, if there's anybody waiting on the very last agenda item for the transportation item, most likely it will be punted to another meeting. So I know we received public comment on that. We've looked at it, so I feel bad, but we've had the same public commenter, and most likely this appeal is going to go to probably 10 o'clock. So I just want to be very transparent in case you're listening. You're free to hang out for that item, but I can't guarantee we will get to it. All right, so I'm going to start with the folks that I have on my list for public testimony, and then Katie will move to folks that you have additional folks. So right now I have Ms. Susan Borger. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Is she with us?
This is Susan Borger.
Okay,
I
perfect.
live on Forest. Am I ready?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, this is Susan Borger. I live on 4th Avenue in Kenema. In reference to this public hearing on matter AP 21-3, I'm advocating for the removal of the condition of approval that the Historic Review Board issued in March for the replacement of the exterior siding on the 5 Kenema cottages. The comp used to justify the HRB's decision referenced a commercial building on Center Street that sits very close to the sidewalk, unlike the cottages. The HRB's decision in this case required the replacement of the siding on the street side only. So I do not think this is an equitable comparison. To quote the Homeowner's Guide to the City of Oregon City's Historic Properties publication, a workable solution to the applicant's needs can usually be found and approved. With this in mind, I would suggest that the City Commission lift the conditions of approval and accept the staff report recommendations submitted at the March 24th meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Borger. All right, the next public comment we have is Mr. Dennis Anderson. Dennis, I see you on the Zoom. There you go, unmuted.
Sure, okay. Let me stop my video here. Oh, unable to start the video. Why is that? Start video. Am I starting the video? You can't see me.
We cannot see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, maybe that's better. Okay.
All right.
Well, I got it here. I have a start video. Is that me? Oh, that's me.
There you go.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm Dennis Anderson. I live in Kenema. To the mayor and the commissioners, I thank you for this opportunity to speak. My statement is directly related to the present matter before the commission, and more importantly, I believe it marks a continuing pattern of behavior that tears at the fabric of our neighborhood. Appellant Edgar AP 2102 fancies himself as a protector and singular voice of the degrading Kenema. Not true. Any drive through Kenema will demonstrate growth and revitalization of a once impoverished community. Unfortunately, his view is just a pretense of passion and preservation. Simply put, from the start, Mr. Edgar did not want the cottage buildings and has made every attempt to subvert their development. His intolerant voice is a history of exaggerated claims, disparaging remarks towards individual neighbors, city staff, even the city manager, and now he directs it towards the HRB. Alarming claims as a declining Kenema and the degrading integrity of the historic district are all false statements. The real Kenema is a neighborhood that is respectably diverse. A diversity that welcomes new neighbors, remodels, new construction, allows for individual neighbors their property rights, exercises social discretion, and permits personal choice. Far from declining, Kanema is a unique neighborhood that continues to grow both economically and aesthetically. Most of our neighbors can be described as tolerant, reasonable, without prejudice, or harboring a historic bias. But to the issue, closing on the 5 years, it is well known that the cottage development has greatly evolved over these many years. They have been widely discussed at city boards, within the city committees, reviewed by the city staff as requested, some more than once. This has been a tiresome, protracted endeavor, adding a year of COVID restrictions, adding work stoppage, even building material shortages, as I understand. Excuse me. It is therefore not surprising that there has been misunderstandings and miscommunications. But here we are in the final phase of the cottage completion. Let me underscore, though, that the cottage development, yes, unique to Kanema, was encouraged by the city, and this commission, along with the city, needs to disregard subjective, disgruntled voices. I offer just 2 questions. Can this commission mitigate this issue and support the items forgiven by the HRB? And second, can this commission mitigate the issue and offer another remedy rather than the punitive imposing deconstruction and removal of siding, at this time mostly unseen, unpainted, and it's on the building? Such an unnecessary waste of material and a financial hardship does not need to happen. I think there's other ways to remedy this, and I think the wisdom of the commission can find a solution. And I hope that can happen. And I hope this project can be done. It's been 5 years plus, and I think the neighborhood needs it to be done. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Sorry to interrupt you. You were over on your time.
Yep. Thank you.
The next person I have on the list is Miss Linda Basinger. I believe she's there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I am Linda Basinger, and I have lived in Kanema for several decades. The board's decision last month regarding the siding was not acceptable to me. The board requests the siding be removed from rough siding to smooth siding. That is a complete waste of materials currently on the home and a waste of money and time. I have 4 issues with the decision of the HRB in making their decision to have the siding of the cottages removed. The HRB used a commercial building in the McLaughlin neighborhood as their comp for siding. The McLaughlin property is commercial. The cottages are residential. Commercial property is usually held to a higher standard than residential. 2, the McLaughlin property is 5 feet from the sidewalk and passing foot traffic, making the siding very visible to the public. There are no sidewalks in Kanema. The cottages are 25 feet from the street and walkers. The type of siding is not identifiable from the street and can only be identified in front of the home. Number 3, the rough siding on the McLaughlin commercial property that was visible from walkers was only requested to be replaced on the front of the property. The sides and the rear of the commercial property were left as it was. 4, the builder developer on the McLaughlin commercial property had a long and checkered past with fudging the Oregon City building codes. And this is the first project Mr. Stagg has ever had in Oregon City. And the Oregon City building codes are so complex and cumbersome that subcontractors cannot follow all of the regulations. And in the 20 plus years that I have lived in Kanema, I cannot think of one project that Mr. Edgar has been in favor of. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Basinger. The next person I have is Mr. Ken Basinger.
I wasn't sure if he was going to speak or not, so he may not.
Yeah, I don't see him on. Linda, do you know if your husband was planning to speak?
No, he was.
Okay.
planning on speaking. I can grab him, but he didn't. Okay.
It's okay. I'm just checking since you were still on the phone. I thought I would ask. All right. Miss Karen Blaha. She was with us earlier. Oh, there she is.
Here I am. Here I
There you are. Sorry, I had to find you on the boxes. There you are.
Thank you. Yes, I live adjacent to the subject property and right next door. So I'm asking the commission to exercise wise judgment to conclude this ongoing hardship. And I'd like you to overturn the HRB decision that requires Mr. Staggs to replace the cottage's sidings. The surface is virtually imperceptible. I've had people actually stop by and ask what the issue is. And when I tell them and they can't see anything, they are more than puzzled, especially when some existing Kenema homes have the same siding surface. So I ask that you grant Mr. Staggs' appeal. Concerning Mr. Edgar's appeal, I have a couple of points directly to his, I haven't addressed all of the points, I've just picked out a couple. He objects to the permitting of the retaining wall higher than 3.5 feet. He ignores geologic and topographic factors, and that is the driveway wall that is right up against my property. This is a matter of engineering. I would like the wall to be higher, but the city doesn't, that's not what happened. That the historic nature of Kenema is being denigrated, I believe to be wrong, misstated. I think it is being protected. It's very important that tourists and visitors can readily discern the truly historic homes from the modern ones. And the contemporary homes that are being built are getting very, very close to looking identical to the ones that were built in the 1800s. I think that is a caution we really have to think about. I know these are difficult decisions for you. The neighborhood has had a lot of stress and angst over this whole issue. So I hope you can come to some decisions that will bring peace to our neighborhood, because we are really eager for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blaha. I have Mr. William Gifford.
Cannot start your video because the host stopped it. Okay.
Ms. Riggs, do you know?
Yep,
oh,
we're
there
good.
you go.
We're good. Thank you very much. Madam Mayor and city and esteemed commissioners, and congratulations, Commissioner Morrow. My name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. And last night, that's fairly recent, it was a beautiful evening. My wife Joyce and I drove down to look specifically at these cottage homes. And I have to say, they're cute as bug's ears. These, looking at pictures in a report just doesn't convey how neatly these are snuggled into the environment. And when Joyce was asking what this was about, I said, well, I know this fellow is building some historic houses. And she says, he's not building historic houses. He's building new houses in an historic neighborhood, and they fit in beautifully. So the comments that I wanted to make, one is really discretional, and that is what looks good and what doesn't. I prefer the character of textured siding. I think it looks more real somehow than a smooth, flashy, smooth siding. But there's economics involved also. The economics of not only the expense of removing the existing siding and then replacing it with smooth siding, which would, honestly, I think is patently absurd. That's not a legal term there, Karen, just my opinion. But there's also the fact that expense will have to be put into the price of the house. If we are concerned about affordable housing, as we all attest to be concerned about affordable housing, we should not be doing unnecessary things to increase the price of a home. There's also a safety issue. I work very closely with the fire district, and I know that this stuff doesn't burn. And I would think that anybody in an historic neighborhood should be concerned about the flammability of their neighbors' homes. So I really like that citing a lot. And the other issue, and the last one, is that of the environmentally sound. If that siding is to be torn off, that's a big waste that our landfills will have to absorb. So with those points in mind, I would really urge the commission to remove that condition number 7 regarding the replacement of the siding. I think that it's over the top, it's unnecessary, and it really does no good to the city, and it just further delays this process, which is going to add a lot to the Kenema neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gifford. And I see that Mr. Ken Basinger has joined us. Welcome. You can unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes. You can state your name and city of residence for the record.
Ken Basinger, live in Oregon City in the Kenema district. And gosh, William Gifford just said really everything that I had to say. I will underscore what he said, as well as the things that Dennis Anderson, Karen Blaha, and Linda Basinger have also said in support of Chris Stagg's position.
All right. Is that it?
That is it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Basinger. All right. That's everybody that I have on my list. Ms. Riggs, who else do we have?
Yes, we have just one more then. We have Celeste Blythe, and I'm going to ask her to unmute. She's also on the Zoom here. Celeste, I think you just unmuted yourself. If you want to begin by stating your first and last name and city of residency for the record.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. My name is Celeste Blythe, and I reside in the Kenema neighborhood of Oregon City. Mr. Staggs is appealing the specific approval of replacing the unapproved texture siding with smooth board. I want to point out a couple of things. First, I want to address the siding specifically. When Mr. Staggs submitted his original application, his design included natural shiplap wood siding, and that's what was approved by the HRB. He did not build to his own plans, and he did not inform or get approval when he made the decision to substitute the textured fiber cement siding that's currently on the cottages. The issues we're presented with today are his own doing. We wouldn't be sitting here tonight if he had followed his own plans. The historic review policies and precedents are very clear that textured siding is not allowed. Further, Mr. Staggs did not present evidence supporting why the textured siding should be allowed. As others have mentioned, the historic board has previously required a builder to correct the siding issue in the McLaughlin area because it's also a historic district. It shouldn't matter if it's commercial or residential. All of the new construction should meet the guidelines. This one didn't. During the previous HRB, the HRB members voted unanimously to approve the cottages with the conditional approval of replacing the siding. Second, and more importantly, I want to point out is that during the HRB where Mr. Staggs was granted the conditional approval, many other items beyond the siding were also not built to the approved application, including, but not limited to, the site layout, skylights, and even the height of the residences. The HRB approved these deviations with only minor mitigation. The HRB makes decisions based on an application in its entirety. Rather than considering the siding in isolation, the HRB considers the influence of the total project on the historic district. While Mr. Staggs is appealing the siding specifically, he's not objecting to the several dozen of deviations that the HRB allowed to remain. The City Commission can't adequately review the siding conditions without reviewing the full application. Appeals for only specific portions of the HRB approval should not be allowed. all of the conditions of approval that were granted by the HRB were done so in a holistic view of how they would impact the other items. Mr. Stagg's appeal should not be granted. Allowing non-compliance sets a precedent for future builds, that they can build out of compliance and simply ask for forgiveness with no enforcement. And that's what he's been doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Riggs, do we have any, or just to confirm, that was the rest of our public testimony?
That's all I had registered, although I do want to mention now that Chris Sweet had submitted for the record a email that I had sent to you. And then I also know that Chris Sweet is on the Zoom now. And I do not have that person registered to speak, but they are here. If they did want to speak, now would be the time.
So are you asking me or are you asking him?
I'm asking you to ask him.
Okay.
Chris is a she.
Oh, excuse me.
I can talk really deep.
Okay, no, that's okay.
So I submitted testimony, and I wasn't planning on speaking because I assumed you all read what I submitted, but I live right next door to the property as well. I am the daughter of Karen Blaha, and I've lived here probably 10 to 15 years, been in the neighborhood probably 25. And the biggest thing is of relying on city staff. The report that they had initially given or not on the last HRB meeting was to mitigate everything, and they gave very clear instructions, and it almost felt like in that meeting one of the board members said, we've given them everything else, we can't give them everything, and let's have them replace the siding. It seemed very much as though they were out to get them on something, and that's what they chose. I sit out on my back porch here. You can't tell what siding it is. I can't tell if it's smooth, unsmooth. You would have to have Superman vision to tell, or someone's trespassing or has binoculars. It's a project that needs to be finished. Did we want the project 4 or 5 years ago? No, we had no one next to us. It's been done well. It needs to be completed so we can have neighbors and the construction can stop. I think Chris has done well with it. So anyway, that's all I got because I wasn't planning on talking.
All right, thank you. But you talking allowed us, for in case there was any commissioners who didn't have a chance to read the email and your comments that came in later this afternoon. So, all right. So with that, we are at the end of the public testimony. And we have 2 more items before I'll close the public hearing, and then we'll take a break. So let's have Appellant Paul Edgar. You have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Again, I'm Paul Edgar. What is important here is that you and the HRB, the City Commission, and LUBA approved a plan, a contract, conditions of approval were part of it, and within this, it required wood windows, and if you don't do wood windows, you come back and ask for to get an alternative approved. It required wood siding, and if you don't do that, if you don't want to use wood siding, smooth wood siding, you come back and ask for approval for substituting it. When it gets into the window design and how you're supposed to do it, and to introduce non-compatible windows in designs that were never approved. No one ever came back. He ordered them out, assembled them, put them installed, and then comes back and asks for approval. That is critical. This is where all of a sudden, it's like making a mockery of the whole process. And I just think that that's what's been happening here. And he knows better. He's an architect. He's on the planning commission. He knows better. And for this to be happening is really an embarrassment. And then to say, well, I don't understand this, how siding should look, or I could go ahead and put 6 windows across a small front end of a cottage and say, that's okay. It has balance because now I'm doing something that I want to do, not what's appropriate. The skylights, the conditions of approval said the skylights should not be visible from the right-of-way, period. And that's it. And so now all of a sudden he installs the skylights, puts them in, and then all of a sudden, oh, can I get this approved? And to me, it's so critical that we have some degree of integrity in the process. It's so important that in the future, we have a way to do things. It's even like when you threw in the fact that I asked for that review long ago, and then all of a sudden, 6 months later, yeah, it starts to happen. But in reality, a long time ago, there was a request for review, and it was done with the idea, let's do it early on so as we can limit his cost exposure and make his operation, make everything come together appropriately. And that's all we're trying to do. If we don't want to have appropriate design standards in Kenema, then eliminate it, period. And that's always been my, we're dying the death of 1,000 cuts. I know neighbors that put on metal roofs and it's against the code, but yet they testify that's okay. We can do what we want, but we're in a National Register Historic District and there are codes, there are standards, and people are supposed to comply with them. And we have the people that are in the neighborhood, and yes, they don't want to have to worry about property rights. They say, I've got property rights. Well, this is almost like an HOA in the sense. And if I was to go into an HOA and put in a non-standard fence, something that's not in the code, they'd tear it down. They could do that. But in reality, this is that type of factor. And what we have is we have standards that no one wants to comply with. And particularly this developer. And I hope that you review this. The windows are not right, the siding's not right, the skylights are not right, and we should be doing something. And I hope you understand, I care. Any of us that believe in historic preservation care. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Edgar. And then the last speaker for this evening is Appellant Chris Staggs, and he will have 5 minutes of rebuttal as well. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Staggs, you can remove the mute and begin.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, commissioners. Like earlier, I'd like to just stick with the facts of what's happening here. And I want to start by just addressing there have been many comments tonight that have misrepresented what is actually happening. And no matter how often those things get said and expressed and articulated, they still are misrepresentations of what really happened and what is really happening on the property. I think it's important for the City Commission to know that yes, I'm an architect, I'm an urbanist, I'm an environmentalist. I care as deeply about the neighborhood and about the city and about what's happening in the city as anybody else on this Zoom call tonight. And I think it's wrong to be to have representations that are saying otherwise. I think it's important for the city commission to recognize the misrepresentations that have been articulated tonight particularly by Paul Edgar and particularly by Celeste Blythe. And it's interesting how they're both very similar when you listen to them. But I'm going to address some specific things here that were said, and that is this statement saying that we are not meeting the guidelines, the historic guidelines, keeps being said over and over and over. And I think it's important to remember that the design guidelines are there as a guide. And when it comes down to whether the siding is textured or smooth, the guidelines are silent about that. So just once again, we said we're going to do wood siding. And when we changed to fiber cement siding that has a wood texture, we believe that we were within the guidelines, the historic guidelines. I think it's interesting just to note that for these past 5 years, when we started the project, the Kenema neighborhood has been largely supportive of building the project, of what we're doing there. The Kenema neighborhood has been supportive of building new homes, cottage homes in that neighborhood, and have felt like this is a 5 homes that belong there, that they are that they complement and work well in the neighborhood from a historic perspective, from a density perspective. And from the very beginning, when we started the project, we did a very extensive assessment and analysis of the historic district. We studied every house in the neighborhood and studied the character, and that's how we came up with our designs and came up with our proposal. So it isn't we just landed one day and decided to build some homes there. We've been committed, and we spent the past 5 years in this project, and we're committed to finishing the project. I want to address a couple of misrepresentations that Paul Edgar said, and that is that we don't have wood windows. Well, all the windows are wood. Every single window in those homes are wood windows. So we do have wood windows. And we do have siding that has the appearance of wood siding. And the windows are compatible with the historic district. And the skylights, yes, we have skylights. And if you look at the historic guidelines, it says that you can have skylights on roof surfaces that are not facing the right of way. So we have one skylight that's facing the right of way, and that's the one back on house number 2 that will be covered by a tree. So I want to end with just reiterating that we believe that we're complying with the historic guidelines, that our homes are appropriate for the neighborhood. And I implore the commission to remove the condition of approval number 7, to remove all the siding from the houses. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Staggs. All right, so we've made it through all of the testimonies, and at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing. The public hearing is now closed, and at this point, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to come back. Let's come back at 9:30, and we will begin commission deliberation. All right, I'm looking for Commissioner McGriff. There she is. All right. I think we have all the commissioners present, so I will call our meeting back to order from our recess. It's time for the commission to deliberate. As mentioned by Commissioner McGriff earlier, we have two different appeals. We have Mr. Edgar's that is focused on windows, skylights, and the wall height. And then we have the second appeal, which is about the siding. So I think we should just take them one at a time. We'll start with the three items from Mr. Edgar. Be easier if we kind of talk about them and handle that appeal and what we want to do with that appeal. And then we can talk about the siding. So Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Eliza Smith. I'd like to ask some questions to staff before I feel comfortable with deliberating. So Kelly or Laura, you made mention several times in your presentation that there were modifications or discrepancies. The question I have with regard to that is, were the things that were modified done with HRB approval prior to them being completed or done or whatever? I guess that's what I want to ask.
I can answer that. When I made an interim inspection site visit in 2020, I noticed a lot of discrepancies that many of which, well, I noticed a lot of things that were changed as a result of the Historic Review Board conditions. For example, they required that the vertical there wasn't siding installed when I went out there at first, but they, for example, no roof cutouts, no window openings that are originally, I think there were lots of windows proposed that were almost like a full wall of windows that you might see on the coast. And the board wanted those windows to be shorter. So I noticed all of those items along with many other changes or discrepancies that had not been approved by the HRB. First among them being the skylights. And then I think as you know, over time, as we kept looking at the project, I noticed more, and those are cataloged in the record by combination of my work and Mr. Stagg's work to kind of catalog all of those changes that were made and explain why.
And my second question is involving the retaining wall. So I am assuming that was reviewed by, I read, so let me go back up. So the 2017 approval, which some of these modifications and changes are based on, I'm assuming they're based on that. So there was a whole set of conditions of approval that the Historic Review Board said, this is the requirement, this is the requirement, this is the requirement, this is the requirement, based on the hearing, based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law. So they made this particular ruling regarding all of these items. So I'm just kind of building my 2017 and then 2020 and then 2000. So that's my understanding. So I thought it was particularly, I was going to ask you about the question regarding on page 3 of the design guidelines for Kenema. You mentioned about alternative designs, but I found it, so I didn't need to ask you that question. So I think for right now, that covers what I needed to know at that particular item. The other thing you mentioned in your report, I think here you said, the HRB interpreted the guidelines to find that as-built skylights are inconspicuous. And looked up this afternoon the word inconspicuous, and it means not clearly visible. So I'm having kind of a hard time relating that statement to what is actually on the ground based on your photographs. So I'm having a little problem with that. Conspicuous means to stand out and is clearly visible. Inconspicuous means it's not clearly visible. So I'm just having a little trouble balancing that. And then I think my last question involves the retaining wall. There was the condition of approval for HRB and engineering that the standard says not more than 3.5 feet. So was that approved at 5 feet, or was the plan approved at 3.5 feet?
The current approval from 2021 is for the 5-foot wall as it has been built. In 2017, the board, there were several different retaining walls on site, and the board's condition of approval was that none of them be any taller than 3.5 feet.
Okay, all right. Thank you so very much.
All right. Commissioner O'Donnell, you're unmuted. Does that mean you're ready to?
Sure, I'll join the party.
Okay.
My first question for Kelly Reed is how did we evolve from 3.5 to 5 feet? Was it something that had been done and we looked at it and said, well, leave it, or was there a pre-approval sought, or why did we have to go from 3.5 to 5?
One of the conditions of the board in 2017 was to remove house number 2 from the plans. And so, but the board did not specify what should be built in its place or what the site should look like in that area where the house was proposed. And so Mr. Staggs redesigned the site a little bit to remove that house, rearrange the parking a little bit, which then changed the amount of grading that was required behind house number 1. So the foundation, my understanding is the foundation of house number 2 paired with a shorter retaining wall, made up for the grade change. And when that changed with the removal of house number 2, that grade change was then the redesign included just a 5-foot wall. It's a single 5-foot wall. And that was moved closer to the front of the property. So the overall grading actually ended up being less with the revisions. But the retaining wall height changed. And that wall was built without the city's, the Historic Review Board's approval. And that's why Mr. Staggs has submitted this application, or submitted the application to Historic Review Board to get that height approved.
Very good. I saw that the report cited what's allowable in the balance of the city, but my understanding is when multiple standards applied, the more restrictive is the one that's applied. But I'm not going to dwell on that here. I'm going to go back to an overview. So what we're talking about here is Kenema as a national registered district. And we've heard lots of subjective testimony tonight. And we're here. The reason we're here is because a gentleman who's a builder, an architect, and sits on our own planning commission didn't follow process. And that process is, and I do engineering, and I've drawn house plans, and I've worked from plans, and I'll tell you the great sin, and it's almost a joke in manufacturing, is the difference between plans as drawn and plans as built. And what we've got here, usually you submit plans as drawn, you submit a list of materials, and that shouldn't vary. I mean, when you're building a home, usually you see a set of plans in a mailbox right there on the job site. The other thing that bothers me about this whole approach is you can actually submit materials for variations, but they require pre-approval, whether that be windows or siding or whatever. It was a process that was built and is described that if you want to submit and get pre-approval, you very well could have done that. But again, that didn't happen. So we see time after time of examples of disregard for the process, and that's troublesome to me. The windows, and knowing that I've built homes, I'll speak about this. They're asking for a 2.5 to 3 inch depth of recess from the face of the trim to the glass. Well, when I look at those windows, if the surround is 1x4 or 1x3, that means it's about 3/4 of an inch of wood out there, plus whatever the depth is. And they're saying that we want you to drive that depth to 2.5 to 3 inches. And I can't even conceive of how ugly that would be if I'm going to put another 1.5 inches or so on top of that current fascia surround. So I don't know how that could possibly be brought into compliance. I saw an example of the building height being out of compliance. The skylights are far from inconspicuous, and the door skylights, you know, I don't even know where they fit into the scheme of things. The other thing that troubles me is the whole approach seems to be not to ask permission, but to ask forgiveness. And the term mitigate comes up frequently in our solution set. And if you look up mitigate, mitigate means to cause or become less harsh or hostile. We shouldn't have to mitigate if we initially followed the plans we submitted and the very thing that controls this. When you enter into building in a historic district, you essentially agree to comply with those restrictions that exist in that district. And honestly, I have no interest in what others have done. I've got no interest in whatever you want to call it, things that have happened before. The question is, does Conema wish to maintain their status, or they simply wish to abandon it? Because I know that there's an internal war going on in that neighborhood between those two factions. So what do you want to do? Right now, it's a National Register status. I thought Ms. Celeste Blythe's summary was excellent. It was objective. It was standard-based. It wasn't subjective. Much as I admire some of my Mr. Gifford, like Mr. Gifford, cute as a bug's ear is not the criteria that I've ever seen. So I don't care about those things, although I got a laugh out of it. This hardship that Ms. Blaha spoke about, it's self-induced, and it's self-induced by Mr. Staggs himself by virtue of the process. So nothing in what I said should infer how I'm going to vote on the individual issues, but the whole process was flawed on so many ways. It's flawed by Mr. Staggs, the in-process inspections, maybe the interface between those people that do structural inspections and those that enforce HRB, maybe that knowledge base is not shared. But in the end, here we are facing a mess we have to clean up. There's things I don't disagree with. I obviously don't disagree that wood is more flammable than that which was chosen, but that's not the issue. The issue is we've got a district. That district is the Conema National Register District, and specifications are called out. And all this could have been avoided by a simple following of the process. And I'll stand on that comment and let others speak, and we'll go from there. Thanks.
All right, I see Commissioner Smith. You're muted.
I usually leave it on all the time, and then I realize when I do turn it off, it's so there's so much to talk about here. I agree with some of the comments that have already been made this evening, but I guess my struggle here is this should be as simple as looking at the guidelines and saying it met them or it didn't. It has no relevance what it looks like from the street, what everyone feels about it. It's what it says. We're supposed to follow, period. And I really can't look at anything to look at that. Everyone submits something that takes bits and pieces of our guidelines and throws it in and spins it in their way. I want to see it. And so I've actually pulled up the guidelines, and it wasn't in our packet, the actual Kenema guidelines, but those things should be in entirety in our information so that we can look at them and read them. Because I don't get how we went from these jumps with the retaining wall size to the jumps with the skylight, whether, what is our actual guideline? Is it that you can see it from the street, period? Or is it on the street side? I mean, that morphed over time.
Visible. It's not visible.
Okay, so is that what our guidelines are? Not visible from the street, period. That's a staff question. I want to know the answers to this. Where does it say?
The design guideline language says that design guidelines should be installed on inconspicuous roof slopes.
No, the entire thing.
The entire skylight guideline?
Where is that in our guideline? What page?
Within the design guidelines document, I can pull that up.
Let's do that.
Okay, so page 60 of the document, principle for skylights, install on inconspicuous roof slopes, mount skylight close to roof plane. Under the design column, rectangular in shape with rectangular flat clear exterior sheet glass. And under the not allowed column, skylights on street side roofs, no dome or bubble shaped skylights, plastic acrylic glazing.
So where does, so the wording that Mr. Edgar raised saying not viewable from the street, where does that come from?
That comes from the original Historic Review Board decision in 2017. It was a condition of approval that, so multiple skylights were proposed on several different houses in the project. And the board in their decision said skylights are only acceptable if they're not visible from the public right of way. And that was a condition. And the decision just last 2 months ago was, a different. Now, I think now that the board was able to see the skylights in person, I think that changed their opinion of whether those skylights met the design guidelines.
Well, it didn't change mine. And the issue with the wall, there was some terminology that basically stated that you minimize the wall by doing this, this, and this, none of which include covering it with foliage. So if there's a guideline that says it needs to be minimized by doing this, this, and this, then those should be the outcomes of minimizing it, correct?
I think the board often uses landscaping as a condition to screen
not in that
items.
Correct?
I'm sorry, the guideline principle says low landscape walls for increased site utility, minimize retaining walls and their heights, use natural materials, finish concrete. It talks about the materials for walls. It doesn't talk about how to minimize their height in the guideline.
Okay. So I do have issues with the skylights. I do have issues with I actually have issues with all three of the issues that have been brought up: the skylights, the retaining wall, and the windows. I don't see that as being balanced. I do have concerns about the side lights on the doors and those kind of things. I'll leave it at that for now. I want to hear the rest of the conversation. But the other thing that I really kind of want to find out is when we talk about the citing, it's really about what the intent of the HRB was looking for. And texture was brought up by Mr. Staggs as one of the main things. And if the Historic Review Board basically was concerned about texture, then that's all that matters. If they were expecting that siding to be smooth, in the examples that we saw, it doesn't matter if you can see it from the street or not. It's what they, have intended for it to be. And I also think that we need to be super careful about trying to compare McLaughlin neighborhood and Kenema neighborhood. They are two separate things, and Kenema neighborhood is much stricter with their guidelines than McLaughlin neighborhood, which is just a conservation district and not a national heritage district. So, comparing the two and saying, well, it doesn't really apply to me. I'll leave it at that. I have a lot of questions that I think we need to fix on a city and staff level in the future, but that's for another day.
All right, Commissioner Morrow.
I'll just keep this short because a lot of my sentiments have already been articulated, but just at the front of my thinking process right now is I'm just having a hard time, as Commissioner O'Donnell alluded to earlier, understanding why there couldn't have been some more safety checks on the side of the development, with the knowledge that this is a National Historic District, and just for those variations that were made due to unforeseen circumstances. And so that is weighing heavily on me as I am thinking about this.
Okay, so I'm going to make a few comments, and I have a couple of questions as well. Regarding process, which is what Commissioner Morrow just referenced, of site inspections, when we received emails, we received multiple emails about concerns about this development and not meeting the Historic Review Board conditions of approval. And I confirmed with staff that our staff was following the standard development process of when inspections normally occur in any new construction development. So if we feel like we need to have a conversation about process and all of that, I think that's saved for another time. But I just want to relay that staff multiple times reiterated that we have a process for building inspections as part of new construction development. My understanding was that we followed that. And at the same time, it's kind of unfair to a developer to just show up on the site when they're not even asking for an inspection or ready for an inspection, just to walk in and say, you're not doing this right, or you don't have this quite right. That's not how our process works. We have points of inspection, and they go out and they inspect at certain points. And so I'm looking to Ms. Reed or Ms. Turway if I've mischaracterized that in any way, but that was kind of my understanding. And so I just wanted to be hesitant about criticizing our staff when I know that I've checked in with our staff to make sure we are following what our standard process is for any development across the city, and we're trying to apply that process equally. The issues before us tonight are not about our process. They're not about whether or not we should have caught it earlier or talked to the developer or whatever. If we followed our process, we did our job. The issue before us tonight is whether or not the developer followed HRB, what was approved, and then then considering this condition of approval. So similar to what my other colleagues have mentioned, the reference to the HRB made about citywide standards of rear walls being at 6 foot being allowed by the city, that's not a sufficient justification when you're in a historic review, historic district that has, like Commissioner Smith said, has more restrictive development. You can't go with the more loose restrictions that apply to the whole city when you specifically have a section of the city that has to follow more restrictive design standards. So I can't agree with that HRB reasoning. The door skylights, when I look at the materials that were provided, I just want to confirm with Ms. Reed. When I look at those, it appears to me that the skylights, the door skylights, were originally proposed, unless what the drawings that I looked at were new kind of as-built versions. So can you clarify whether or not those were in the original building design?
The skylight, there were multiple skylights proposed on many of the houses in 2017, and the Historic Review Board didn't specifically approve or deny any particular skylight. They just simply said these skylights are okay as long as they are not visible from the right of way. So
different things. You're talking about two different things.
Yeah, I'm talking about the door skylight.
Sorry.
Side lights.
Sorry. Thanks for jumping in. The side lights were approved in the original 2017 application. There were no conditions of approval. They were proposed like that. They were built that way, and it never was
an issue.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my interpretation as well when I kind of looked at the materials. So I know that has come up in these proceedings as far as whether or not that was allowed or not. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I share Commissioner O'Donnell's concerns about adding trim to windows. I would have maybe liked to have heard from the appellant as to whether or not he thought he was actually going to add that much trim around windows to try to check that approval box. But currently, I do not believe that the windows that are in there meet in HRB design. So I have issue, and I also have issues like with similar to what Commissioner McGriff said. The issue with the skylights has been very clear. The conditions of approval was clear. The comment about inconspicuous, that's, again, I don't agree with HRB. When I look at the photos, I can plainly see the skylights from the road. That's not inconspicuous. That does not align fact versus what you said. And so therefore I have an issue with that. And so the wall height, the last item here is the wall height. So it appears, it seems to me that the wall height was adjusted for grading and slope issues in order to, if we build a higher wall, I mean, this is kind of logical, right? We build a higher wall, we can contain a higher slope and don't have to, if it's a lower wall, then we would have to do more grading and remove the amount of slope that's coming into that wall. That I assume that's kind of what happened. That seems to make logical sense to me. In the pictures that were provided, that seems to be what you're implying. You showed side profiles of, the wall, the different height. Clearly, you can tell, you can see the grading, and so I am concerned about if we were to remove the wall or minimize the wall height to follow regulation, how much regrading and all might need to happen in order to meet that 3.5 foot standard. So I think that's, for me personally, that's the real question before us is when at the same time I've heard over the last year, lots of concerns about the amount of grading that was happening on site. So this level of grading that's behind this wall height, I didn't feel like we got a lot of information about the science or the stability of that issue where the wall height may play a part. So Ms. Turway, you raised your hand. So do you have something to add here? Like that could be helpful?
Yeah, it seems as though there's some confusion about what the guidelines say about wall height. Kelly, can you articulate that 3 foot versus 6 foot and what standards actually is?
Sure. Well, there's a citywide standard for 3.5 feet maximum height in the front yard, and that applies in the historic district as well. And the current constructed project meets that code and meets that requirement. This wall is in the back. I think HRB, in finding that in referencing the 6 foot maximum wall height, I think they were just acknowledging that the 5 foot wall height also, well, that it met the citywide standards that apply to wall heights. And they found that it met the design guideline for wall heights, which is to minimize them. The exact wording is minimize retaining walls and their heights. So I think that we typically read that to say minimize the number of retaining walls and the height of each retaining wall. And there's no specific numbers in the guidelines that anyone has to comply with. It's just more of a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and the 3.5 foot wall height was initially chosen across the property, and and it was chosen to be made 5 feet, which is still I guess considered within the guidelines of a minimizing the wall height to accommodate for the lesser amount of grading that happened on the site because we removed house number 2. Correct? Okay. I think that's all of my questions, and I see Commissioner McGriff. Before I go to Commissioner McGriff, so we're at 10 o'clock and we have a commission procedure, commission rule about going past 10 o'clock. So unless there's any opposition, I'm looking for opposition to continuing this meeting to resolve this item tonight after 10 o'clock. Any opposition to continuing?
I think we can resolve. I don't want to go any further than 10:30, but I'm willing to continue.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yeah, I'm willing to go to 10:30, but that last explanation that Kelly Reed gave to me differs in our original explanation, which is within Kenema, the walls were supposed to be 3.5 feet. Yes, citywide, there's a looser standard, but we agreed that the tighter standard applies. So the way she just explained it, it sounds like, well, this is now okay. And I don't think that was not the original explanation, unless I misunderstood. 3.5 feet in Kenema, 6 feet citywide. So I don't know how that last explanation seemed to say, well, oh, that wall is now okay. Anyhow, I'm willing to go to 10:30.
Okay. We have a majority on that. Miss Reed, do you want to? I do feel like now there's some confusion. So
sure, I can respond to that right now if you'd like me to.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So the guidelines don't have a specific height limit at all, but in 2017, when the board reviewed this project initially, the board wrote a condition of approval for this project saying, it looks like you have a lot of retaining walls, or, there are several retaining walls proposed. We want, knowing that grading is going to change a little bit once you go through this geologic hazard review, and there might be some changes required, and you might be changing, making some modifications based on this house being removed from the project. We want to ensure that retaining walls are minimized. Therefore, we're going to hold you to 3.5 feet. So the board decided to put a maximum of 3.5 feet in this particular case. But that was not based on any specific number in the guidelines.
But it was still a condition of approval. And had,
Yes.
again, if the builder's going to have to violate that for whatever reasons, you would think that they would be called to the attention and seek approval rather than just proceed. No further comment.
All right, Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Smith. So I want to try to hone down my comments to some specific issues. So for me, the issue at hand is about what the conditions of approval were for this application.
Yeah.
Not whether we pick and choose which guidelines we choose to follow, but the conditions of approval. So if the conditions of approval said skylights are not to be visible from wherever, then that's the condition. If they said it's 3.5 feet for retaining walls, that is the condition. I feel really concerned that this entire application has put the city of Oregon City, and by reference, the integrity of our land use planning process, the quasi-judicial land use planning process, in jeopardy. Because when we, as a jurisdiction, whether it be the Planning Commission, Historic Review Board, or the City Commission, when we make findings and conditions of approval, that is it. They do not get to be changed unless you go back through the process. And so the process here has been compromised. I agree with you, Commissioner O'Donnell. I am not very sympathetic to the concept of, I've got conditions of approval, I'm going to do something else, and then I'm going to come back and ask the board to change them. The applicant put the Historic Review Board in an untenable position of having to adjudicate their conditions of approval because somebody did something they should not have done. If we do this, it calls into question our process. And if you guys know me at all, it's about the process. Sometimes I don't always want to follow the process, but I know about the process. And the process was the conditions of approval are what needed to be followed. From 2017, that was the marching order. I know that you can see that I'm sitting outside on my porch. You can see just behind me a historic window and the fact that it's got a trim around it. I have casement windows on my house. They are 6/1. There is the clear delineation between the 6 panes above and the 1 pane below. I don't see any delineation other than a flat bar on the windows. So that is a concern. I didn't know whether or not casements were something that were traditional in Conema, but in reviewing the styles of that era, I don't find casements, but be that it may, however it needs to be done, the condition of approval to add dimension to those windows is paramount. Otherwise, I'm going to recommend that they be taken out and put in correctly. So that's my suggestion for that, because it needs definition. It needs to look like there's something to the window instead of it being flat. The retaining wall kind of thing bothers me because I know enough about engineering to be dangerous. I would not have had a concern about the retaining wall being 5 feet if there had been a review and prior approval to construction. The condition of approval was 3.5 feet, not 5. I agree with Commissioner Smith, putting some vines on it is not going to cover it up. So there needs to be another option for making it look like some sort of a wall. But I also don't want it to look like it's been fasciated with a pattern that's modern. It needs, if it's going to have fascia on it, it needs to be a pattern that would have been traditional in Oregon City. The siding, again, you can see behind me, there was the ability here in Oregon City to have smooth siding. My recollection and understanding is that the Historic Review Board in its entire being has never approved textured siding, ever. It does not look like wood. It's always been smooth. I am probably sure that the condition of approval back in 2017 said it had to be smooth. That does not mean you get to change it. So that's 3. So what am I missing on the 4th one? Is it, oh, the skylights. Yeah, I already said that. I'm not sure how the skylights are inconspicuous. As I said, that I've not paid a site visit there since before the end of last year, but based on the pictures, they're not conspicuous at all, as Commissioner Smith said. They're pretty darn visible. And I cannot in good conscience talk about this application and the fact that the process was not followed. It's about the process. It's about the conditions of approval and what they mean. And when the city says, these are your conditions of approval, we have ways in which that are equitable and fair to go back and modify them. Not after they're done, but before. So that is where I am coming from right now. I'm just very, very disappointed. I do want the people who testified, I thank you for your testimony. I couldn't find anything to hang my hat on with regard to the criteria because we had, as Commissioner O'Donnell said, we had a lot of very interesting opinions. It's not about whether we like it or not. Did the guidelines and the conditions of approval get followed as was the requirement by the Historic Review Board? It was appealed. Those that conditions of approval were finalized after those appeals were over. That is what we go by.
Commissioner Smith.
And where in our materials are the original conditions of approval?
You say that again, Commissioner Smith. Unfortunately, a giant truck just went by and I heard you think, where were they? Is that what you said?
Basically, what I've been looking through in all this paperwork since probably 2 o'clock today is the basics that we're following. And it's been very difficult in this presentation to do that. So I just want to know, where are the original criteria, conditions of approval spaced out where we can look at them? I don't think it's in our packet.
If you look at the previous public hearing links, which is the last attachment.
I want a copy of it. I want to actually see it on paper.
Oh, I can share my screen.
That would be helpful.
Commissioner Smith, I found them and looked for them. I actually did it the hard way, but
my point is, it should be in our materials, easy to find. Period.
I understand.
We've been struggling with how to present or not give too much. And so what we had been doing in the last few planning items is putting links to prior agendas.
No.
So that's not noted.
You gave us the materials that you wanted to fit the staff's recommendation, period. And that's typically the way we get it. We want all the information that we need.
So this was included in the packet for the HRB in the March 23rd hearing. It's a status of each condition of approval from 2017, whether it's been met, whether it's something that hasn't been installed yet, like landscaping, or if it's something that's not met and the board was under review by the board. Is there a specific one you'd like me to scroll to?
Commissioner Smith, you're muted.
Basically, I agree with Commissioner McGriff. I mean, we need to look at how the original conditions of approval applied to these issues, and so we can deal with them individually.
Okay, so we're at 10:15. And so I'm going to look to the commission here. Do you feel like you need more time to look at more material in order to make a decision, and we should continue this hearing to a further meeting, or are you ready to make some decisions this evening? Commissioner McGriff.
Well, I would like to recommend that we take the simpler of the two and dispense with the citing issue tonight. I think that can be done. And I would like to make a motion if you would like that right now.
Sure.
I would like to move that we uphold the decision of the Historic Review Board as was written. And do I need to give the specific citation there, Kelly? For the particular application?
This is AP 2103, the appeal regarding the citing condition.
Yes. Okay, so AP, whatever you said. I don't have my agenda right in front of me. I have the design guidelines in front of me over here.
All right, the motion is to approve the Historic Review Board decision, which is in file AP 21-01, which would require the appellant to remove the siding and replace it with something else more compliant.
Miles Smith, no, I don't think it's something else. I think it's with smooth siding as was originally specified.
I don't have exactly the HRB either, what their condition of approval was, so.
Just to clarify, so you would be denying the appeal and upholding the latest HRB decision related to citing, not the original decision related to citing?
So I would rephrase that. So I'm moving to deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Historic Review Board under, is it AP 2103?
Yes.
Okay, that's my motion.
Second.
And in plain language, what does that require of the builder?
Ms. Turway or Ms. Reed?
That would require the builder to remove all of the existing siding and replace it with either smooth fiber cement or wood siding.
Understood, thanks.
Yeah, that needs to be really clear.
Just to clarify, on only the facades that face the street or all the facades?
No.
Every facade of every building.
That was not, I did not believe the Historic Review Board said just the front. I don't subscribe to that.
Are there any other questions about the motion? And okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Riggs, will you call the roll?
Yes, so Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye, and I want to just clarify, I understand about the waste. I understand about the environment. I understand about affordable housing, but that is still not an excuse for not following the design guidelines. And you can't.
All right, we're in the middle of a vote.
Thank you. Thank you. Aye.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
No.
Motion passes.
All right, so we have dispensed with half of that public hearing. Is there, it sounds like we need to continue the other public hearing, AP 21-02, I presume, to our next meeting.
I would so move.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded to continue this hearing to our next meeting. Date certain would be
May 19th.
Oh, May 19th, sorry.
All right, Ms. Riggs?
Yes. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so I would encourage you all, if you need additional materials to research, like you, I had to go look for some other materials and still kind of dig around. So I assume it's appropriate, Ms. Richter, to follow up and make sure we have materials or ask questions, or can you provide any guidance?
Absolutely. We stand ready to help find anything or clarify anything. We are available to respond to any questions.
All right. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page and following the rules. So the next item on the agenda is general business. Item number 9A, update to the guidelines for the transportation impact analysis. Is there a motion to move this to another meeting?
Oh, I would so move, and I feel really bad because this will be the second time, and I'm really sorry, Mr. Lewis. Do we want to specify a specific date for this?
This is not a public hearing,
what's
so
the meeting like for the next
this is
meeting?
not, yeah, this is not a public hearing item, so we don't need to have a date specific. So we will let staff move it to an appropriate meeting date. At this point, we're just moving it off to tonight's agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Riggs?
Yes, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, item number 10 on the agenda is communications. Mr. Conkle, do you have any communications for us tonight?
I do not, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, is there anything from the commissioners you would like to share?
I just wanted to thank you, Commissioner Lyle Smith, for the making sure that the proclamation for Historic Preservation Month got back on the agenda for this month. It's something near and dear to my heart, and the Historic Review Board has been working very hard, and I just appreciate the fact that we're calling attention to our wonderful community and Oregon's hometown.
All right, I do not see any other hands. I don't believe I have any pressing communications for this evening either. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.